Hello there. I am going to be showing you a tutorial on making a Christmas card or just a holiday card, including a landscape and some animals. So the first thing that you want to do is you can fold your paper in half. What I did is I'm using some painter's tape that I have taped all of my edges, and that is going to prevent that water from going underneath and give me a nice little white border. It's totally not required, but it is just something I wanted to show you because sometimes people do that. Some techniques that you're going to learn about in this tutorial. We're going to go over the technique wet on wet. We'll go over dry on dry and wet on dry. You'll understand those once we have finished the complete tutorial. So the very first thing that we're going to do is give ourselves a nice background. So in order to do that, we're going to give ourselves what's called a wash. The wash is what is going to give us a little basic color on the page. And if you look at the picture, the main color that I see is gray. So I'm going to take my watercolor palette. I'm just using regular, this is a Prang watercolor set, and inside there I have, I think I have 24 colors, no, 16 different colors. Somebody else had used this before me, and you can see that they have left their paints on the palette. Now, if you're the only one using a palette, you can do that. Here's a tip to know right from the beginning, that if you are mixing different colors and you want to go back to using those colors, you simply let them dry in your palette. Here's another one of my palettes where I've been mixing my own colors. And you can see I have all these dried up colors. Guess what I can do? I can take a wet paintbrush and wet that, and then I can use that again. Isn't that awesome? Something to know. So, and then here's another palette that I have. I already have some browns mixed up, and obviously here I have some greens. Those are helpful to know about. So, one of the things that I asked my students to prepare is to make sure you had a paper towel handy, and you also want to make sure you have water, because obviously we're doing watercolor paints. So I'm going to go ahead and just clean off this palette so you can see just a nice fresh area. See how I wet that paint that was all dried up? And if I wanted to, I could use that again, but I'm going to clean that off. And that's how I do it. Just wet it with a little bit of water and then dry it with your paper towel. All right, so now I am ready for my first step. I want to mix a bit of gray. So my first color that I'm gonna mix, my brush is still had purple on it. I'm gonna wipe that out. I have a blue-gray color that I see quite a bit of in my picture here. So what I'm going to be doing is mixing up using some water. I'm going to start with a little bit of black, and then I'm going to add just a dash of blue to that. A little bit more blue. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to water that down a lot. Adding lots of water to this. Why? Well, because when you do a wash, you are doing just a really, really light watercolor just to get some paint on the paper. Now I'm just going to add a little white to this to just soften it up just a little bit more, and then I'm going to go in with just a little bit more water. Now I have a kind of a blue-gray color. I am using a larger paintbrush because I'm going to be covering a large area quickly. So the objective with this is to get just a basic, just a little bit of color on my paper. So if you look at the picture here, and I'm going to zoom in for you so you can see it a little better. So what you are looking to do here is, if I'm pointing out a couple details. In the background, we have what looks kind of like hills or fog, okay? So I'm going to be going in and adding a little bit of this gray color just to get some basic information on the page. It's not highly detailed. It doesn't have anything extra, just a little bit of color. All right, now we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to use my brush and just kind of get a little bit of information on my page. So this is called a wash. I use a wash when I do acrylic painting as well. And if I want to go in and do a darker wash, what's nice is all I have to do is touch another color with my paintbrush, and then that will create more, a little bit deeper color in here. Now, what I'm doing might seem really light to you, or it might seem kind of heavy. I don't know. It depends on what your perspective is. It's going to dry pretty light, and it's going to be really subtle, and it's not going to have much detail at all. Okay, I'm just getting a little information on my page. And if I want to, while I'm doing this, if I want to add a little more color, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to mix my color in my palette here. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to go in with just a touch of black, and look at how fast that black spreads. Wow, too much. Guess what? I do that on purpose because you are going to, when you try to use your black, you're going to try to go in and you're going to go too fast too. So I'm going to show you the mistakes that happen with watercolor. Be careful with black. Be careful with black. Don't use too much. If you use too much, you can always fix it. Just mix your color in a different space on your palette. You know, I do that a lot, actually. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move over to another area, and I want a little bit more of a gray color. So I'm going to go ahead to my white. Now, those of you at home might be thinking to yourself, well, Miss Beer, I don't have white watercolor. You didn't tell me I needed white, so I didn't buy white. No problem. All right, so now what I'm doing is I mix some more colors, and on the areas that I already did my wash, I watch how I'm just touching the page real quickly. And I'm just adding a little more color in here. A little bit more gray. Okay? This area right here is going to end up being a Christmas tree or a tree in the background. So, you know, what I'm doing is just getting a little more pigment on my paper. See how it spreads? It's a good thing. What if I don't like what it's doing? What if you're getting frustrated and you've only just started this darn painting? Have no fear, I'll show you what to do. If you make a mistake or you hate what you've done, you can fix it. Okay? I'm going to show you a technique called a lift. Lots of other artists out there might have different terms for it, but that's what I call it, okay? I'm going to call it a lift. Say I don't like this color right here. I'm going to take my dry paper towel. Boom. Gone. That's called a lift. Okay? So if I do something that I don't like, I can fix it. Okay? If you wait until your paper is dry, can you lift it off? No. Your paper has to be wet. And you need to do it quickly. Now, what if I want to control what I lift off of my paper? Okay, what if I want to make, what if I have a little dot on here that I want to get off? Okay, I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm going to squeeze it to a point. Good enough. And watch what I can do. Where I touch my paper, I am lifting paint off. Your paper has to be wet to do this. If it's already dry, all you need to do is take a wet paintbrush. Let's say there's an area right here that I wanted to do a lift. Make sure it's wet. And I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm going to only touch the areas that I want to do a lift. Now, you probably can't see that very well from you and from what I can see on my camera. You can't see it, but believe me, I am able to control what is being pulled off of my paper. And that is a really great thing to know as you begin watercolor painting. Now, here's one thing you must know about watercolor painting. You mustn't ever rub your paper with a paper towel. Don't ever do that. When I am trying to remove something from my paper, do a lift, I can dab it, I can touch it, but I do not rub it. If you rub it, your paper's going to fall apart. So don't do that. Okay, that is the first part of watercolor painting. Now I'm going to let my paper dry. I'm going to spread some more of this around just so I have an even coat, and then I'm going to let my paper dry. Going in with some areas that I want it to be a little bit darker. Now, if you're sitting at home and you're thinking to yourself, well, I do have a blow dryer handy, that might make my life a little easier, go for it. Okay, if you want to use a blow dryer to help you with this, you want to make sure you don't get too close, and you want to make sure that you are not blowing water across the page. You don't want that to happen. And, like I said, you're trying to, just expedite the process. You're not trying to blow water all over the page. That's definitely not what we're doing. All right, so now I am about ready to move on to the next step. So what I want to do is let my paper dry, and I'm going to use a blow dryer. I will turn off my video and make sure that when I come back, I'm all ready to go for the next step. Okay?